Hello, this is Air, and welcome to the 28th episode of Death Row Executions. I received quite a few requests after my first You Choose segment, and today's story is on Virginia Christian, who was the first female convicted murderer in the state of Virginia to be executed by method of electrocution one day after her 17th birthday. Virginia Christian was born on August 15, 1895, in the state of Virginia. During this time, slavery had just recently been abolished, and a lot of Black Americans during that time were unable to vote, as well as not having an opportunity to serve on juries or be a part of the justice system. The Civil War had also recently ended, and the country as a whole was struggling. There was a Reconstruction period to help rebuild the country, among other things, and laws were passed to help give the many now free African Americans housing, jobs, and education. During the Reconstruction period, the same leaders who helped end slavery also put into place involuntary servitude as a form of punishment for a crime, and many Black Americans were taken advantage of within the criminal justice system. Although slavery was abolished, it did not magically change the sentiments of superiority amongst the racist white Americans, and starting around the year of 1877, the Jim Crow laws emerged. These laws were put into place to reinforce some of the hatred whites had for blacks, so there was now a new era of racial tension and segregation. With that being said, Virginia came from a family of slaves, and she worked as a maid for her master or boss by the name of Ida Belote. She had two parents who were married for 22 years, two older brothers, an older sister, and another sibling who unfortunately passed away as a baby. Virginia's father, Henry Christian, had worked for Ida's parents, and her mother, Charlotte Christian, also worked for the family but was now paralyzed and unable to work. Because of her mother's inability to work or care for the house, Virginia started working at a very young age in order to help her family. Virginia had a rocky relationship with Ida because she was not treated fairly and was often hit. Many family members urged Virginia to stop working for Ida, but she continued working for her up until a couple of days before the murder. On March 16th or 17th, 1912, while Virginia was at work for Ida, Ida became irate because she believed Virginia stole a skirt from her. After accusing Virginia to her face, Virginia denied stealing anything and decided to quit and work for a new woman by the name of Mrs. Robinson. Ida told Virginia that if she did not return the skirt within a specific time frame, there would be a punishment, so Virginia decided to just leave and had no intentions on coming back. Ida eventually found the skirt that she accused Virginia of stealing, but she now was having issues caring for her house with 8 kids without Virginia's help, so she decided to travel where Virginia lived and confront her parents. In a sworn affidavit from Henry, he spoke of the day of the murder, which happened on March 18, 1912. My name is Henry Christian. I am the father of Virginia Christian, who has been sentenced to be electrocuted on August 16, 1912. I am 49 years old. I was born in Hampton, Virginia, and have lived here all of my life. I knew Mrs. Belote, her mother, and father before her. I worked for Mrs. Belote for the last 12 years, and she never paid me for some fish I sold her, but she was always disagreeable, so I did not bother about the money but let it go as she was hard up. I am all broke up about this matter, and sometimes feel like I am about to faint. Virginia was a great help around the house. Her mother had been paralyzed for the last 3 years, and Virginia was all I had to depend on. The only time I can get my mind off of this trouble is when I am at work. Mrs. Belote was always sending for Virginia to work for her, and if she had left her alone, Virginia would be here now. I told Virginia to stay away from Mrs. Belote because Mrs. Belote was crabbed and she would surely get in trouble. I told her to stay away from her and to keep away from Mrs. Belote, but Mrs. Belote and her children were all the time coming after her. The morning Mrs. Belote was killed, she came to my house at about 9 o'clock and asked for Virginia. Mrs. Belote met me out at the gate and asked me if I was Virginia's father, and I told her yes. And she asked me, was Virginia in, and I told her I didn't know. And I said, her mother there is in the house, and I said, if you will go in, you will find her mother in there, and she can tell you where Virginia is. I had been away all the morning, so I went to the front door and let her in, and then she sat down in the corner there by the stove and told my wife that she liked Virginia better than anyone she ever had worked for her since she had been living in Hampton, and she said to my wife, "I don't see why in the world Virginia treats me in the way she does. I want her to come and wash my clothes, as I always get along with her, and I don't know what is the matter with Virginia, and I hope she didn't get offended with what I said to her. I didn't put on any water this morning because she didn't come there, and she generally comes a little after 7 o'clock, and now it is 9, and I have not yet seen anything of her today." Then my wife spoke up and said, "I guess Virginia has gone down there, and she said she was going down there to your house," and she said, "No, I have just come from there, and she was not there." She said she did not put any water on because she didn't have but a little wood, and that she did not want to start a fire and burn the wood before Virginia got there, and she said, "I didn't have any help, and I have 8 children, and they didn't give me anything." And then my wife told her, "You know, Mrs. Belote, you ought to know that I am paralyzed, and you ought to not keep on after Virginia to come work for you, and she has got plenty of work here to do." So I went on out and left my wife and Mrs. Belote talking. That is all that happened at that time. I did not know anything more about it until 3:30 o'clock or 20 minutes after 4, when we were surrounded here by policemen, and I did not know when they came there what had occurred. The policemen put us all under arrest, but did not take us away. Virginia never gave us any trouble before this, and I believe what she said, that she was trying to defend herself. In a sworn affidavit from Virginia's mother, she stated, "My name is Charlotte Christian, and I am the mother of Virginia Christian. As near as I can tell or can come at it, I am 40 years old. I worked for Mrs. Belote when I was a young girl before I was married. I did not know that there was any dispute between Mrs. Belote and Virginia about the skirt until the day that Mrs. Belote came after Virginia, which was the same day that she was killed. I asked Mrs. Belote why she did not come and let me know about the skirt, and she said that after she looked, she found the skirt, but that she had accused Virginia of taking the skirt, and Virginia had told her that she was not going to work for her anymore, and she kept on insisting for Virginia to come to her house, and I made Virginia go. That was the day the trouble happened. After Mrs. Belote left my house in the morning, Mrs. Richardson came for Virginia to work for her by the month. Virginia knew that Mrs. Richardson wanted her to work for her before she went to Mrs. Belote's, and Virginia told Mrs. Richardson that she would be to her house the next morning. Virginia had stopped working for Mrs. Belote because she accused her of stealing a skirt. And last, we have a sworn affidavit from Virginia's aunt. "My name is Harriet Christian. I am a sister of Charlotte Christian. Charlotte and me married brothers. The morning this happened, I had started out for the factory to work, and Mrs. Belote's little girl had been here for Virginia and gone back. And I called Virginia at the gate when I was going out, and I said, 'Virginia, Mrs. Belote has been here after you,' and she says, 'Yes.' And then I said, 'What do you keep fooling with Mrs. Belote for?' I said, 'She's never going to give you anything but 25 or 30 cents, and that is nothing for anybody to give you.' And I said, 'Your mother wants things, the children want things, and you want things yourself.' And I said, 'If you want to go to work, why don't you get yourself a service place?' And she said, 'Aunt Harriet, that is what I'm going to do,' and then I went down to the factory." When Virginia finally made it to Ida's house, Ida became angry with her and started an argument. There are reports that say the argument started over Virginia stealing a locket and a skirt, but by the accounts of the sworn affidavits, Ida had already found the skirt that she lost, so the argument could have easily been over Virginia not wanting to work for her anymore. Despite why the argument ensued, it still continued, and Ida hit Virginia with a spittoon. In the next room over, there was a window propped up by 2 broom handles, and they both ran for the window. Virginia was able to grab a handle first and hit Ida on the forehead with it. Ida began to scream hysterically, and in an attempt to muffle her screams, Virginia stuffed a rag in Ida's mouth and left. Ida eventually died from suffocation. Some reports say that when Virginia left, she took Ida's purse, which contained money and a valuable ring. Virginia was soon arrested, and when questioned, she admitted to hitting Ida but was surprised when they told her that Ida was dead. She continued to say that she tried to defend herself, and it was not her intention to kill Ida, but to stop her from screaming, and that she was scared of getting hurt herself. Later, the local newspaper came out with an article dubbing Virginia a murderer and described the scene with Ida laying face down in a pool of blood with her head horribly mutilated and a towel that was stuffed in her mouth and throat. During trial, they tried to assert that Virginia shoved the towel in her throat with a broomstick. After the news of the murder, the community was in uproar and demanded a public hanging. The lynch mobs were abundant in Elizabeth County, Virginia about this case, and during trial, Virginia did not take the witness stand, nor were there any testimonies taken from anyone supporting Virginia. Because of the atmosphere in the community, the only sure thing the jury felt they had to do was sentence Virginia Christian to death by electrocution. She was charged with first-degree murder, meaning that they believed Virginia had planned the murder and that it was premeditated. Ida's only brother, Luther Hobbs, wrote a letter to the governor William Hodges saying that he too wanted a public lynching, but has agreed to the decision of Virginia being sent to death by the electric chair and asked him not to commute her sentence. He said that he believed Virginia was most likely waiting in the house for hours waiting for the right opportunity to kill Ida, and first-degree murder was the right conviction. Virginia's mother also wrote a letter to the governor asking for the sentence to be commuted to life in prison. Virginia expressed that the murder was not planned, nor was it intentional, and those in support of Virginia believed second-degree murder, meaning the murder happened in the spur of the moment, would have better fit the crime. The governor declined Virginia's request, and on August 16, 1912, a day after her 17th birthday, Virginia was sent to the electric chair at the state penitentiary in Richmond, Virginia. Henry Christian gave the mortgage of his home in the amount of $250 in order to help Virginia during the trial period, so after her death, the family was left with no money and could not afford to transport Virginia's body from Richmond to Hampton, Virginia. Virginia's body was then handed over to the Virginia State Medical School and used for science. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen and watch this video. Also, please make sure you turn on the post notifications because from now on, I will be premiering most of my videos and watching it live with you, and I would like to be able to communicate with you guys while watching it at the same time. I would also like to give a big shout out to 2 new patrons on my Patreon, Rob and Sandra. Thank you guys so much for your support and for believing in the channel.